Fella. Welcome back to a Celtic State of Mind. You caught me talking to Ian. Just that it's a good job we weren't being rude on using insightful language. I'm Paul John Dykes. Today I'm joined by Ian Conroy, and I was just saying, hopefully, we will be joined by Liam Carrigan as well, all the way from Japan. If not, then you're stuck with me and Ian, and we're here to talk about Celtic for the next hour. So welcome to the show. Ian, I've been receiving some really great messages in the last few weeks talking about the fact that people are just discovering Acsom, which I love. I love to hear that. We've been running for 8 years and people are still discovering it. I think sometimes when there's a lot to talk about, not always good, people do look for an outlet. They look for an outlet they want to speak to or communicate with fellow Celts. And that's what's happening just now because of everything that's happening with the action, the fan action, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, for anyone who doesn't know, I live in New Zealand usually, but I'm back to work over in Scotland, and obviously we've known each other for a long time. And I've you asked me to come and sort of join the crew on Acsom about 3 years ago, which I've loved. But prior to that, it was an outlet for me to listen to and sort of connect back to home. The same as any other sort of Celtic podcast. I look at lots of online stuff like obviously the overlap and under the cosh. I've kind of got my head around that now, and I can stomach presenters because I have some good guests on. So things like that, all that kind of content, it's really was kind of like manna from heaven for me out in a sort of rugby country. So obviously down to be part of it. It's astonishing actually because I've been into Glasgow and I've had a few people come up to me and sort of know my name and things like that, and it freaked me out because I just see it as like a Teams call.
Yeah.
Friends, back in New Zealand. So you kind of don't even you forget really that other people are watching it. But the fact that people come up and say nice things and they love the show, it just makes you feel great. The fact that all I'm doing, all we're doing is talking about a subject that we love, which is Glasgow Celtic, and you see how far and wide it reaches and how many people it touches, and everyone's in the same state of mind. We all love our club, and with the fan action, I was listening to Clyde Super Scoreboard for my sins, which I quite like as a guilty pleasure, really. And Marvin Bartley, who I think is a really good guy, and I like him. He's a good bubbly guy. But he was sort of talking about the protests in general, and he was saying, once the team starts winning and put, the protesting numbers will dwindle. And I thought, well, I think you've got that wrong because the mood of the fans who are all of us who are moved to sort of take part or to support these movements, it's not done in anger. It's done in a way where enough is enough. We're not angry men now. We're angry at obviously the outcome of not being in the Champions League and kind of what led us to it, and the fact that it was shooting ourselves in the foot. But this is not done in anger. This is enough is enough, and the fact that we can sort of mobilise and come together on platforms such as this and speak about it is a wonderful thing, really. And again, it's not. I appreciate the board probably want the same as us, but they've gone about it the wrong way for a long, long time, and that's something that's got to change. So yeah, it's good to be part of, and long may it continue.
Absolutely, Ian. Echo all of that. And in relation to the momentum, I think Marvin Bartley's probably talking about this shift in momentum. I have actually spoken to Jim Orr about this because obviously Jim is the OG from back in the 90s, whereby in an effort to save Celtic Football Club, a group was set up called Save Our Celts, and Jim was at the forefront of that. And the one big thing that he always said was an issue, Ian, was when Celtic won a few games or maybe changed the manager or signed a player and maybe beat Rangers, and then all of a sudden it was more difficult to convince people this is an issue that we need to fight all the time. And I think, that is something that we're well aware of. But in relation to what you've been saying there's quite a lot of updates, and I want to talk about how this could all be sorted. Because, this isn't something that you're thinking, right, this is going to be always a conflict between the Celtic support and the club. I'm more of a view of, right, how do we sort this? Now, and I think that in terms of an action group, that's very much what they are asking the club. Can you come to us with answers on those 7 initial questions as a starting point? And then we can take it from there. We're going to be touching on all of that kind of stuff. We're obviously going to be covering tomorrow night's game back in Europe. There is a fan zone at Barazat designed for anyone who's never come and joined us at a fan zone. It's free entry. There is entertainment in the form of David McKendrick on the stage, giving you a live set. and most importantly, Ian, there is free pies at half-time. So come along to Barra's Art and Design to watch the game on the big screen. It's a good laugh. You might already have plans, but if not, and you're wondering where to go, come down to Bad and join the Acsom troops. We're going to be talking about Belgrade tomorrow as well. And in relation to maybe like a proposed lineup based on the Partick Thistle performance and the games leading up to that as well. I'm also going to be touching on the financials as well. And we have drawn Rangers in the next round. So we'll be touching on that. Also, how do we get Harmony? I believe there is a 5-point action plan. This is sounding all a bit corporate, isn't it? But before we get stuck into that, let's bring Liam Carrigan into the chat. Liam, welcome all the way from Japan. I hope you are well. And you're wearing a retro style Adidas trefoil Celtic top. I think it was based on an old style 80s goalie top, perhaps. Looks like it.
I think so. Aye. It's one of the better ones that Adidas have done since they took over, and that's maybe a bit of an indictment on them that one of the best shirts they've made is one that we've never actually worn a match. So.
Seen a lot of them in the crowd. It's a good starting point, actually. We're not here to moan and groan. We've got a European game tomorrow night, which we're going to be touching on. Decent performance at the weekend. The arrival, the impact of Tuneski, who I think looks like a tremendous signing, albeit it would have been great to have him for the Kairat games, and everything else in the world of Celtic. But we're going to start off with what I'm calling a 5-point action plan on how the Celtic board can restore harmony. Is it possible? I believe it is. Right, the first thing is, I'm just going to get stuck right into this. Remove Peter Lawwell. Sorry, Peter, but obviously in relation to falling on your own sword, the Sun newspaper article, the hit piece, Liam, I think it's something that should have been dealt with, even if the fans were already in harmony. This, for me, is the first thing you do. You deal with that internal issue, that conflict that Brendan was asked about and called out the other week. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Whoever was the person that instigated that needs to be removed. I think that would come under either gross incompetence in terms of allowing the information to be leaked, or industrial espionage in terms of like leaking confidential info to an outside source, knowing it's going to end up in the newspapers. Both sackable offences, I think, in most companies.
Without a doubt. I think in isolation, you look at that and think, well, let's hope Ian, the club would have dealt with that anyway. But I do think that the pressure has been ramped up in relation to everything that's happening off the field with the fan action, the Celtic Fans Collective, as it's now called. This would be the first, for me, this would be the kind of first thing I would do, because if there's bad blood, if there's a snitch, if there's a rat, if there's somebody leaking information, you absolutely need to get rid of them. And there's no reason other than an internal investigation, Ian, to delay that. Get it done.
Absolutely. A word that I keep thinking about, and I've mentioned this in previous pods, is the word ego. Now, the fan movement, this is not an egotistical sort of posturing thing that us fans are doing. We're doing this because we love the club. It's we have the common good of the club, not each individual member of any protest or anyone of coming together. Now, whether it was Peter Lawwell or not, I can't say that for sure. There's a lot of noise sort of suggesting that it was him. It's egotistical. It's self-serving. It's not for the club. And remember, these guys are custodians. They're just passing through. They're custodians of a great club. We'll all pass away, and our children will pick up the mantle and forevermore. That'll keep going in perpetuity, I hope. But we are the fans. We're the fabric. And I know they're fans as well, but they get paid. They're employees, so that there's a line that's been crossed. They have to have a professional outlook on things. But when it crosses over into, and Liam, you're quite correct. It is industrial espionage. It's gross misconduct. It's leaking of information. Is gross misconduct. Sorry. So it's absolutely appalling that it's happened. and it's egotistical. If there's a clash of personalities, or or Peter Lawwell doesn't like the manager and Brendan Rodgers, you don't act in that manner. You don't besmirch someone's good character, someone's good name, especially when the way he left last time, and we don't know the full circumstances of what really happened. But I think we can sort of piece together from what's happening this time around what happened the last time. So any ego has to be left at the door when you're representing Celtic. You have to think of the greater good. I used the example before about the Native Americans not considering any decision they made, any big decision they made that didn't consider future generations. That has to happen at a club like Celtic because, as I said before, the fans will go on forever. We won't, they won't, but fans will go on forever and ever. So leave the ego, and if the ego can't be left, you've got to go. But I think obviously the damage is done now. Whoever did that hit piece has to go anyway, regardless. A manful apology won't do this time.
Absolutely not. And then I think what the opportunity that arises from this will give us, Liam, is the possibility of a reset in the boardroom. Because last week I spoke to Paul Smith. It was a wide-ranging interview that we did. Paul has been the CEO of a $750 million. What does that even look like? $750 million turnover company. He's been the CEO of a company that size. He was for 12 years a financier and advisor of the board under Fergus McCann. Not particularly for 12 years, but during that time. And he talks about a reset, Liam. And I just think this is giving us an opportunity right now where everything's come to a head. This is a tipping point. And then you look at that situation with the unnamed individual who obviously I'm referring to as Peter Lawwell, the unnamed individual who has sold the story to the Sun. And you look at that situation and say, well, right, that gives us an opportunity. Let's see the opportunity in this, Liam. Let's reset. Okay, AGM, stepping down. Whatever the reason given publicly will be the reason given. But we'll all be able to add 2 and 2 together on that one. But it also gives us that opportunity, doesn't it? To say, right, things are stale. You've got guys in there with 20 plus years on the board. Let's mix it up. Let's bring in some strong heavyweight characters, as David Lowe called them, into the boardroom. Now is the time for me. And this is point one of the changes that I think have to be made. And these kinds of changes could be pretty immediate, Liam.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is with the AGM, this is an opportunity for likes of Lawwell or maybe others as well to go out kind of on their own terms, to walk out and say, okay, this is what I've done with the club. This is as far as I can take it. I'm going to step away and let someone else do it now. And you know what? They would probably say, right, okay, thank you. Off you go with our best wishes, because that's the reasonable way to do it. But the other issue is you're talking about guys. I mean, we talked about this last week on the blog, that Lawwell has taken around £30 million out of Celtic over the years.
Ian and I were just talking about that before we came on live, Liam. People who are paid to be there versus people who pay to be there. And trying to remove this versus bit, bringing everybody together and having some kind of harmony. I mean,
the point I was going to make was that it's not even a money issue for these guys anymore. If we could just say the board are just greedy, that would be a lot easier to handle, because you could just say, oh, well, they're just a shower of greedy chancellors, but they're not. It's no greed, it's ego. And ego is far more difficult to get around, because no amount of money can sway them. If you've got 30 million quid plus in the bank, no amount of bribery or coercion is going to make you step aside if you think this is what I want to do and I'm going to keep doing it. I believe that we really need to come at this from multiple angles, and we need to make it clear that, look, for your own legacy, you need to step away. That's because that's the only thing that matters to these guys now. They've made their money, they've had their careers, they're all, 70 or near enough 70. I think Lawwell's like 65, 66, something like that. And they're all getting to that age where they've got to think about their legacy. And do you want to be remembered as the guy who oversaw the death of Rangers and Celtic getting 9 in a row? Or do you want to be remembered as a guy who ran Celtic into mediocrity because you stuck around for 10 years too long?
Mm-hmm.
That's the question facing him right now.
It's so true. It's so true in football and in life in general, Liam. There comes a moment like the sweet spot, if you like, where it's just time. It's Paul Weller leaving the jam, Ian. This is it. There's a moment where you do it. And with regards to that, this for me isn't a witch hunt. I look at what we've achieved during the time, let's say, of Dermot Desmond being involved with the football club, what we've achieved during the time of Peter Lawwell being at the club. We are in incredible times. Yeah. Now, by the way, a big part of that is going back to something that Liam mentioned earlier on with the death of Rangers in 2012. Absolutely, that contributed to the success that we've had. That cannot be denied. When you compare the 13 years since then, if you were to compare the 13 years before their demise, and you just compare the trophy count. So absolutely, as much as we love having digs here and there, that's contributed to the domination that we've enjoyed over the last generation, Ian. So yeah, there's lots, and this is another thing. There is lots we've done well. There is lots we've got right. We are very, very stable, but the financials are out, and we'll be looking at them as well. But I do feel that, I don't think what they'll do, Ian, is they'll give any kind of credit whatsoever to the organisation of the fans coming together, the collective. They won't say this is because you've got Peter Lawwell on your hit list poster that we're removing him. They'll find a way. They'll find a way of shuffling the chairs around, I think. But that for me is something that could be on the horizon, particularly with an AGM coming up. Another one that they could sort out pretty quickly, and I think they need to before January, at the very latest, is give Brendan Rodgers a new contract. We're going on almost a week and a half, let's say, since Rodgers sat in front of a packed press room, Ian, and said, I want to be here. Under the correct circumstances, I want to remain at this football club. Get it done, Ian. Get that done. Announce it. And then what you're starting to do here, right, before you start building the bridges, what you're starting to do here is show a bit of intent.
Well, of course, that's all we want. But I mean, I know Brendan came out and said that, but as it stands at the moment, he's not going to stay. Can't stay, can he? How could he stay if the person who did this hit piece hasn't been identified and told to leave? That's the first thing. But I agree with you. I echo, and I watched the episode of This Is Acsom on Friday with Paul Smith, and he made some very, very pertinent points, which I agree with. I've tried to be as balanced as I can. I've got a lot of respect for the board. Dermot Desmond, it's the fact that we have the weight of him behind the club is a fantastic thing, and it's a thing that we've all sort of said before as well, in terms of the way he runs his businesses. They must be fantastic, because the processes, everything he has in place, it can't be run the same way as Celtic are being run. And that's what needs to be implemented at Celtic. Celtic is a global brand, but it could be so much more. We're a big club, but we have parochial mindsets. And if you look at even the playing staff, look at the squad we have now compared to the likes of Paul Lamberts, Paul McStay, all these Henrik Larssons, Chris Suttons. Look at the standard of the players we had just under Martin O'Neill. And obviously Gordon Strachan had to sort of I suppose downsize from his tenure, and he did it remarkably well. But since then, it has been managed decline. The standard of player. I know Dermot Desmond sort of said a few years ago that he thought the current team, it was at 2021 or something, he thought that current team would have beaten Martin O'Neill's team. What rubbish! And with respect, Mr. Desmond, I totally disagree. It's like night and day. And we're sort of scratching around trying to find gems. We've had some great players over the years, but never at one time. So that this kind of trading on past glories. If we challenge it, look at what we've done. I remember Ronnie Moran at Liverpool. Apparently, that dominant Liverpool team, he used to come into the dressing room after they won the league, usually every season, and throw the medals at the players and say, "Take one if you think you deserve one." And that was trying to keep the players' feet on the ground, so that you can count your medals when you finish playing. You don't look backwards. If you want to stay at the top of stay on your pedestal, you have to keep looking forward. You can't congratulate yourselves and slap yourself on the back, and there seems to be a lot of that. And when you do that, your eye is taken off the ball, and that's when your competitors will catch up with you. They'll match you, and then they'll take over you. So, you know, I'm sure Mr. Desmond doesn't do that in his business life, and I think that's pretty down to the fact that he's letting, you know, his subordinates run things in situ, and they're not doing it. They're brilliant in their own fields, but it needs refreshment. It needs refreshment.
Oh, without a doubt. We'll come back to the field part that you mentioned, Ian, because I agree with that as well. But just on one of the points that Ian mentioned, Liam, I'm going to come to you. If I was on the other side of this argument, thinking, actually, we do things well, what do you know about football? What do you know about recruitment? What do you know about success? Because we know that is the contemptible kind of attitude at times, Liam, that fans are becoming accustomed to, unfortunately. And if they were to turn around and say to you, yeah, but you've just made a point there that proves that we do things well, and that is that Martin O'Neill took us to a UEFA Cup final in 2003, failed to win it, but in order to assemble that team, we spent millions of pounds on massive wages. You know, that the wage went through the roof. The wage bill went through the roof. We were buying guys like Chris Sutton for £6 million, obviously Neil Lennon, £5 million, Alan Thompson, £4 million. That team was assembled by Martin O'Neill, basically plucking players out of the English Premiership with the wages to match. We didn't win the UEFA Cup. We downsized, like Ian says, but Gordon Strachan gets us to 2 last 16s in the bounce. Would the club then turn around to us, Liam, and say, see, you don't have to be chucking millions of pounds at it. We know what we're doing.
That is probably what they would try to do, but
yeah.
It's a difference between saying that and actually proving it. Because I think most of us would see right through that for the nonsense that it is. We had 2 phenomenally good managers in Martin O'Neill and Gordon Strachan, who I don't think sometimes gets enough credit for what he achieved at Celtic. Because he was working with greatly diminished resources compared to what Martin O'Neill had. But he still kept us punching above our weight in Europe. You know, we had moments like beating Man United and, you know, things like that. And it was amazing to do that. But the problem was that because he was so successful despite the board then thought, oh, well, we can just keep this going because this obviously works. And it was diminishing returns. You know, we beat Barcelona in 2012, and that was the last time that I honestly remember Celtic producing like a really big, shocking result in Europe. One that a game that we
that shook European football, didn't it, Liam? Yeah.
We were expected to not just lose that game, but get absolutely hammered. And we went out and won it. You know, that on form, the way Barcelona were at that time, that should have been a Dortmund. That should have been like a 6 or 7-1 to them. But we beat them. And we've not done that since. You know, that was 13 years ago now. Where's the progress from there? Where's the development? Where is the hope that we're going to get back to that level? This current board don't have it. And it's easily achievable if you bring in the right resources and the right people, but they refuse to do that because they will not be told that they're wrong on anything.
No, this is the problem. This is a contempt that we talk about, Liam. Now, Ian brought up a really interesting point there in relation to who'd beat who. I love that kind of stuff. There was a kind of one of the latter Rocky movies had that. There was a simulation which prompted them to train up and actually fight the current champ and all this kind of stuff. Anyway, as we know, AI is the place to go when writing statements, and it's also the place to go when looking at things like this. So I asked, just as you were talking, Liam, AI, which team would win out of Brendan Rodgers' invincible treble-winning side and Martin O'Neill's treble-winning side. In a simulated league or cup tie, Grock would back Rodgers' 2016-17 Celtic to win 2-1 over 2 legs or 3-2 in the final. The defensive record of just 24 goals conceded domestically would stifle Larsson's supply, while Sinclair and Dembele's pace exploits Mialbi and Boyd on transitions. This is tremendous. O'Neill's side scores first via a set piece. Lambert assists to Larsson, but Rodgers' last late-minute magic seals it, mirroring their actual cup heroics. Dearie me. If we're talking legacy, O'Neill revolutionised Celtic financially and culturally. his 6'2" still haunts Ibrox. What do you think, Larson hat-trick or Dembele masterclass? Well, there you go. Grock reckons Rodgers' team would win. Let us know in the comments section. Ian, this kind of question, though, I think it all depends on how you look back. Are you looking back with this kind of golden hue? I remember the O'Neill treble. Who am I going to the games with in that season? My brother, my mate Tony Murphy, if you're watching, and my other pal Jason Turner. So we all sat together during that season. And quite frankly, the team that we had then were facing a very, very strong Rangers team. And that, I think that has to be taken into account. And we triumphed and triumphed well. The 6-2 game obviously was mentioned there by our friends at Grock. Brendan Rodgers' side were not facing a kind of dominant, strong Rangers side. So I think you've got to take that into account, Ian.
I think you've just nailed it. I was just about to say that, so you took the wind out of my sails. But of course, the Rangers were spending huge amounts of money, and it looked like they were going to run away with things for a long, long time before Martin O'Neill came in. So the fact that he came in and did so well so quickly was brilliant for us as a club. And that 6-2 win, I watched that down. I think it was at the Reading Festival, and I watched it with Mick Head from Shack. And
you should have watched it with me. We've spoken about this.
Of course, yeah. Probably in the same pub.
Maybe we could have been in the same pub. I might have noticed Mick Head though.
Yeah, you probably would have. We actually sat with a Rangers fan who was a big Love fan. He was gutted that Mick was a Celtic fan. But anyway, so that's another story. So that was the start of things to come. Obviously, we got stuffed 5-1 in the following fixture, but Martin O'Neill was he was a godsend. And I just think if you go man for man, Paul Lambert, Champions League winner. I was listening to the Jock Brown interview that Amy did a few years ago. I listened to that yesterday. Actually, it was interesting, some of the things that he was saying that kind of mirror things that are happening now.
Right.
How far we should be going, and how the fact that Celtic have the statements recently, they said that we weren't going to improve the South Stand when we're still in the Scottish Premier League. Now, what better chance have you got to sort of mimic or mirror how a European Super League might look with the new format of the Champions League? Mm-hmm. The fact that we've made a balls of that and we're not in that is it's criminal, really. So there's a lot of things that could have been done differently, and it's just the way we are.
The thing is, Ian, I think what I would take from that is we don't think like a Champions League club. We'd look at Champions League as a bonus. We're thinking like a domestic club, like you said, and I do think there's issues because it's going to hold you back. So in terms of our 5 points that I think could restore harmony at the football club, some of them the club won't like. In fact, probably at least one out of two the club won't like that I've already mentioned. The third one, you've got to communicate with fans. And Liam, it sounds so obvious and so simplified, but you have got to communicate with the fans. The last two communications we've had from Celtic is the worst statement since time began, right? Which came out a couple of weeks ago, followed by the financial results, which obviously had a statement from Nicholson and a statement from the chairman in it. You've got to communicate better with the supporters. This leads me on to point number 4, which is set up a meeting with the Celtic Fans Collective. Let's get round the table. Let's have a number, I would say, of spokespeople within the collective attending that meeting with Peter Law-Wallaby still at the football club, Michael Nicholson, Chris Mackay. Dermot Desmond probably won't be there. He probably wouldn't even dial in. But let's have that meeting and let's communicate and let's try and work towards a solution. We're not even there yet. In terms of communication, tell us what the club's vision is. Liam, what is that vision on the whiteboard? Let us know. Michael Nicholson has highlighted it and stuck a post-it note on it. Let us know what it is. Tell us what the stadium plans are. It all seemed a little bit ambiguous to me. Why you mentioned domestic? Is there a chance that we might not be playing domestically? Let us know. What are the plans for the academy? There was a game last night. Someone brought it to my attention. Millwall versus Watford. Daniel Kelly wasn't seen. Vata got a few minutes. What is happening with our young players and why they're not produced for the benefit of Celtic? What are your recruitment plans? Are we going to tear up the model? because quite clearly the CEO and Chris Mackay can't do the deals properly. They can't do them quickly enough, and they can't negotiate. So what are the plans? Do we have a director of football coming in? What about the communications moving forward? There's no point, Liam, in having one meeting. Let's actually have communication going forward. So the points 3 and 4 for me are all around communication and embracing this movement rather than using it as an us v them.
I think there just needs to be the point needs to be hammered home that they work for us. We don't work for them. They work for us. We buy the merch, we buy the tickets, we support the club. They have a job because we allow them to through our own financial commitment.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the problem. They talk down to us like we are an annoyance to them. You know, pretending to look at their phones the other day while the protest was going on. That was utterly contemptuous.
Totally.
Utterly contemptuous. And that is the biggest problem, is that you can argue about who owns the shares and whatever, but without fans, no football club can exist. Celtic would disappear within 6 months if we all just stopped putting our money out there. And so they need to get on board with that. They need to understand they are custodians and they are employees of something that is much bigger than them and will always be much bigger than them.
Without a doubt.
And it's shape up or ship out. Either get your act together and start listening and start communicating, or make room for people who can.
Yeah, yeah.
And the thing is with Celtic as well, in my limited dealings with them, and admittedly this was 20 years ago, but from what I understand, the culture has not changed. Everything was outsourced. It was always, we'll just pay somebody to do it because we can't be bothered. The stadium catering, outsourced. The hospitality, outsourced. The cleaning of the stadium, outsourced. But why is it the one thing that they actually need to outsource, they haven't, which is the media? Mm-hmm. Get a media consultancy firm in there to run it for them. Someone that actually knows how to speak to football fans. Because so often, even when they do, very, very rarely actually try to engage, it is so stage managed, it's so manufactured, it's so artificial. I mean, I still believe that statement was AI generated last week. But even if it wasn't, it read like it was, and that should be an indictment on whoever wrote it.
That's actually worse.
Yeah,
Liam, that's a great point. It's even worse if that is your communication skill, that you actually appear like a robot, then that's even worse. But no, you're spot on. And in terms of communication, we all work within the communication industry in various different guises. Ian, right now, what we're doing is we're communicating with everybody that's tuning in, 1,600 plus on this Tuesday afternoon. We are communicating, and we're going to bring in some of your comments coming through. Jungle Lion, first off the bat, Hibs game is bigger game this week. Now, that is an attitude I think a lot of fans have got once you're bounced out the Champions League. You concentrate on the domestic. But what I would say, in argument to that, or in disagreement to that, Ian, is that one of the best seasons I have ever had, and this is strange, supporting Celtic, we never won anything, and that was 2003, where we went to Seville. Now, I know they've changed the structure of the tournament, but this is in effect the second-tier European tournament, as was the UEFA Cup back in the day. So I am looking at it very much like, look, I don't want to be in the Europa League, I want to be in the Champions League, but whilst I'm here, let's make the most of it, Ian. Let's get experience into some of the newer players. Let's use guys that have already got the experience to hopefully be able to galvanise the team and get some decent results. So I get what Jungle Lion says, and I think a lot of people agrees with him. I've got to say, though, I'm looking at tomorrow night and thinking it's still Europe. We still need to put a good showing in. I don't want it to be a forgettable night like many of the Ronnie Dyler European nights. I'm not sure if Ian's frozen. You back? I can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. You're back. You're back. There might be a slight...
You can hear me now? Sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. I wonder if my reception's going a little bit. I do apologise. Of course, there was that question last season, and I kind of was one of the people who said, I would take us going all the way in the Europa League for the glory. But now it's actually happened. I'm gutted about it. I want to be in the big tournament, and I want us to progress, because there's so many dissenting voices, especially in England, that sort of say Celtic are a Europa League at best. They say the same about Rangers, and lump us both together. And how can we defend that if we actually are in the Europa League, or we don't do very well in the Champions League? Last season, we sort of disproved that theory, but you can't just do it once. You got to do it consistently. So I think, we are where we are. So I think it's, we're not sort of as toothy as we should be. We're not as armed up as we should be. But I think we should to do as well as we can in the competition. Obviously, that goes without saying. I do think as well that, I'm well known to sort of keep complaining about the formation, and I think we're predictable in the league. I think it was proven, even though we won 4-0 at Partick, we were so reliant on Tunetke doing something individual, because it's so tried and tested and rehearsed and slow. So I think, to get to go into play into Europe, I think it'll be a refreshment. Other teams, they don't play against us domestically every week, so I think it'll be a bit more open, and I think we'll have a bit more success playing the sort of tried and tested 4-4-3. So, the longer this team sort of stays together, if we can get the right wing sorted out, I don't know how far away Jota is from coming back. I know he's a left winger, but he can play on the right. That's kind of going to be our biggest hope. But I think that's kind of the biggest frailty we've got as a team at the moment. If we had a dynamic right winger that could complement Tunetke, I think we'd do so much better. So I think that's, against Partick Thistle, everything was down the left.
Mm-hmm. The thing for me, Ian, right, is you've just given me a vision of going into the Kairat game, and there's 2 points to this. The first one is get your recruitment done early and make sure that the main targets are in the building for those matches, right? So Tunetke on the wing, on the left wing, Tunetke, right? Through the middle, Dyson Maeda, and keep Kuhn until we're into the Champions League proper. There was no rush to get rid of Kuhn. Como wanted to pay the money. Okay, no problem. We'll deal with you once we get these 2 games out the road. Imagine that as a forward line. That kind of thing for me is just so basic that, there was a laziness and a complacency to think that, what, they're like St Johnstone, we'll just, we'll waltz this and we'll go through it. We can do the business later. That was wrong, and it's been proven wrong. Jay Conley, Jay Larkin, great to have you back on the comments on YouTube. And Kuhn, one of our best players in Europe last year, you're reading my mind, and he's gone. And in his place tomorrow night will probably be Yang. And on Ian's point, it actually leads me to my final point of my 5-point action plan. How often can I say point in one sentence? In order to get the board and the fans back on the same page, singing from the same hymn sheet and all that kind of jazz. And the final bit actually is, let's start looking at January now. Let's start putting the wheels in motion right now. And part of that would be whatever you're doing at the moment, tear it up, because it's not working, right? We cannot be in this situation again where you've got the CEO who is overwhelmed with work because it's all on him. He probably doesn't find negotiating a natural skill. As Ian said before, he's probably brilliant as a club lawyer. That should be his position. He shouldn't be the CEO dealing with football clubs all over the globe to try and prepare Celtic Football Club for Champions League qualifiers. So let's prepare that right now. Let's have a look at the structure of the recruitment team, the setup, tear it up, and show a little bit of intent, Liam. And you know what? Go back to points 3 and 4. Communicate that with the fans.
Yeah. I mean, excuse me. This transfer window just passed. For all it was a complete car crash, it could have been handled much better if the club had just communicated. See if they'd said, "Oh, we were going to get Dolberg, but it fell through at the last minute." Whatever, just talk to us. Just tell us, "We're sorry. We tried to do this, tried to do that, but it didn't work." But just nothing, no communication at all. I can accept. I mean, to a certain degree, I can accept things going wrong. Right? Everybody makes mistakes, right? But what I cannot accept is mistakes are clearly made, and nobody takes responsibility for it. So the same mistakes can be made again and again and again, and there's never even a dialogue about it. And not only that, but anybody who tries to have a dialogue about it comes under attack. We've seen it all, we get the comments that are clearly people, working under pseudonyms or whatever that are...
They haven't posted since the COVID season. That's all I'm saying.
Yes, interesting that. But that's the thing, there's some sort of concerted campaign behind the scenes to try and undermine the people who are criticising the board.
Mm-hmm.
When it would be far easier for everybody if they just sat down and talked to us like people. You see it in politics, you see it all over the world now. If people would just talk to each other instead of talking at or talking past each other, the world would be a much better place.
Mm-hmm.
That, and the Celtic Board was just one symptom of this much, much bigger societal problem, I think.
Without a doubt, Liam, and I think when you go back to a point where Celtic season tickets were not selling out like they do now, in and around and I've got to go back to it was the seasons following the demise of Rangers. Neil Lennon and Peter Lawwell went on a whistle-stop tour of CSCs to communicate, Ian, actually what they were doing was to try and drum up interest in season tickets. And the reason that for me it's a wee bit hollow is because they're actually there to sell you something. Let's just do it because communication is good. And this is not a normal customer business relationship. This is football and this is fans. And I spoke about this yesterday. This is not about a transaction, yet the board have made it very transactional, haven't they, Ian?
Well, that's it. It's a football club. We're not a business, and you should have that. Imagine if the board had that kind of ethos of a fan, and spoke with honesty and integrity rather than actually, having an ulterior motive, which is to try and just get our money in. If they were open and honest, say, look, guys, we need your money because of X, Y, and Z. And you're upfront about it and honest, at least you get it. But if it's to go around and sort of drum up things with an ulterior motive, it's it's a bit cold and calculating, as you say. So, look, I'm just sick of saying the same thing really over and over again. It needs refreshment. The fact that Michael Nicholson, I mean, it sounds a little bit like BS to me that he's got all this strategy mapped out and he's on a whiteboard in his room, and he's got a note to self: must communicate to fans. How ridiculous! And
he's still not done it since that was revealed. He's still not communicated.
It's like if I said that in a presentation to my boss, I just couldn't
believe it. You'd have been as well sticking with the dog at your homework, Ian.
Exactly. It was so fanciful, and to now I can't remember anyone calling it out. It's so ridiculous. Sorry, Michael Nicholson, but it just doesn't sound plausible at all. Maybe take a picture of it and show me, and I might believe it. Obviously, you could do that retrospectively, but it needs change. It needs change, and also as well in terms of the size of the exec board, because it's such a small echo chamber. You need more people. Michael Nicholson shouldn't be doing all these things. He shouldn't be doing he shouldn't have to be all things to all men, because of course it creates a silo, in which we're seeing now the fruits of that silo messing up the transfer window.
Yeah,
being known to be sort of hard to deal with footballing agencies, so we're not getting access to sort of players that other teams are getting. Go ahead Eagles laughing at us, and then sort of praising Rangers for the way how they were sort of easy to deal with and how stupid and how hard it was for us. These are all blows to a reputation that we don't need.
Yeah.
So we need more personnel. We need fresh ideas, but we need a structure in place where these things don't happen in future.
The thing there, Ian, I'm going to go back to Paul Smith's interview on Friday night where he was talking about having knowledge of large agencies who will not get back to Celtic. We are not on their radar. If there's 3 or 4 clubs chasing their player, Celtic are at the bottom of the pile because we don't have the reputation at the moment and we don't have the relationships with the agencies which are so important in order to get some business done. Imagine Brendan Rodgers touring CSCs, not a chance. No, I agree with that, Drew. I think there's a better way of communicating, and I think it's a drip effect where the communication channels are always open at the moment. It's the shutters are down. Yous are the enemy. Do not criticise us because we are great. Get the medals on the table. But Tony Ratton brings this in. How's the single tickets sales going for the Europa League? All season ticket holders will have been receiving an email from the club over the last 24 hours, I think it was, in relation to the single purchase of tickets individually to season ticket holders. The packages obviously have not been bought to their absolute capacity. This is a knock-on effect to get knocked out of the Champions League. You cannot blame the fans for that. So, you know, down the line where you've got your financials in a year and you're saying, oh, you know, we've been hit with this and we've been hit with that. No, the reason you didn't sell the Europa League packages is because the fans' action following your inept display in the transfer window meant that we didn't make it into the Champions League, so you made less money. That's on you. You can't put that back on the fans. John Mullane, great to hear from you. Check this out. Fooled by the time he's in Frankfurt is John. He's en route to the game. I love this. First beer about to be had. Come on. Be great if you could share a wee image of that with us, John. That's maybe going to happen in the future where you can give us that airport picture. And of course, we do have one subscriber in Vatican City, and he's in today to say, good morning, gents. Thank you. Yes, let us pray. Here we go. Fantastic. Scott McGill, clubs often, this is a good point, clubs do often ride out periods of fan dissatisfaction, particularly when finances are strong, which gives the board more staying power. The fans group needs to keep the pressure on the board. I do think it's going to be something that we will face as a fan movement, Liam, whereby even tomorrow night, if we go out there and we get a resounding victory, for example, we follow up with a brilliant result at home against Hibs. The hardcore collective, and by the way, it is a quite a large, sizable hardcore when you look at the signatories on the open letter, 420 plus groups of fans representing tens of thousands of individual fans. But success masks a million deficiencies. That is going to be one of the biggest obstacles, isn't it?
Yeah, but the difference is, I think that I won't presume to speak for everybody involved because obviously I wasn't at the meeting. It was at 4 o'clock in the morning my time. But the difference, just to contrast, right, just purely for contrast, look at the protests that we had outside Ibrox at the weekend and look at the actions that that Celtic fans are taking. Celtic fans know this is a long haul. This could take 6 months, it could take a year, it could take longer to get genuine change. And we know we're not going to get everything we want. But if we can see marked improvement and hopefully a few changes in personnel, I think most of us would accept that. Whereas over at Ibrox, it was sack these two right now or we riot was basically the message. And it's like, all you're going to do there is entrench the positions of the people in charge because they don't want anybody telling them that, you know, you have to do what we say. And they're like, no, we're the bosses, we'll decide. And our board have that same problem. But we get around that by making it clear to them, look, we're not going to threaten you. We're not going to get personal with the attacks for the most part. We are not going to be violent. We're not going to be overly aggressive. But we are going to keep this going. And it's not going anywhere until you acknowledge it and do something about it. And I think that's the difference is from the moment this Celtic fan collective has been birthed, if you like, we've all known this isn't going to be solved in 10 minutes. It's not going to be a case of show up at one game with your banners and get what you want. But the other side of the city seem to think that's how it works. And that's why they are running into the proverbial brick wall right now. Whereas we are, I think, building and gaining momentum. And I expect, and don't be surprised, I expect in the next couple of weeks a major, shall we say, counter-offensive in the narrative. I think you're going to have various people who are either connected to the Celtic Board or who have, shall we say, agreements in place with the Celtic Board financially, will be trying everything they can to undermine this movement, to divide it, to turn people against each other, to try and sabotage it. Because we're going places with this. It's happening.
Yeah.
And the board do not want to acknowledge that, because they think that the second they acknowledge it, the fans have won.
There was a moment, as well as the checking the phones, Liam, there was a moment at the weekend where Chris Mackay utters something to Michael Nicholson. And I did think to myself, right, any lip readers out there want to tell us what he said? There's somebody on TikTok does it. There's somebody on TikTok does that. He looks at all these moments in, politics, and there's people in crowds talking, and she will actually tell you what they're saying. It's phenomenal and quite insightful. Both insightfulness, not just insight. Right, so here we go. And some great comments coming through. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. 1,800 now live. One in Vatican City. Being the Bastard, it's a family show. They are too old, and we are being left behind by clubs like Bodo Glimt and Brentford. I remember Brentford being mentioned by Dom Mackay in his opening address to Celtic. Right, we're talking communication. What about that? What about that? Where basically there was a sweet booked at Celtic Park to unveil and introduce Ange Postecoglou to fans, albeit it was fan media at the time. And I know that that doesn't represent all the fans, of course it doesn't. But they invited people who had never been invited to fan media events, Acsom included. Dom Mackay more or less presented it, and Ange Postecoglou sat next to him. And it was refreshing. It was communication. It was raw. And what he spoke about, Dom Mackay, then, is how to do things differently. And he cited Brentford as an example. And obviously, being the Bastard mentions Bodo Glimt. You could probably throw in other clubs over the last few seasons that we've spoken about in terms of European progression, if you like, and how they've done it. Bodo Glimt being one of them. Club Brugge being the one that's in vogue this season. And I think last season or the season before, it was FC Copenhagen. We were looking at them saying, why can't we do that? Swindle. Yeah, and I think the learning from that would be, go and figure out what they're doing right. Replicate it. I always remember Tommy Burns constantly going on about Ajax in terms of youth development, and he would go over there on a regular basis. He was always going on about the Netherlands and how they produce young footballers. So he went over, he was learning, constantly learning. And you talk to the people who came through the academy at Celtic Park who had any dealings with Tommy Burns, and they will cite, that seems to be an overused word today, they will cite Tommy Burns as a huge influence and having a brilliant impact on their career. The guy knew what he was doing. He knew his chops, and he did that because he did all the research. Go out and replicate it. Swindle. They extract generational wealth. This is a very good point. The people we are talking about do extract generational wealth from Celtic. Check out Liam's blog, link underneath the video. Last week, I think it was, Liam, where you spoke about the money made from Celtic, because that was a talking point last week, that Peter Lawwell has enjoyed over the last 20-odd years. And we were talking 30 million quid. So, yes, they have extracted generational wealth from Celtic fans, doing exactly what they do now. Why exert more effort? The only people they bring in are their own, aka folk who won't rock the boat. And that's why the aforementioned Dom Mackay lasted something like 77 days. I think there's been books written about the length of time that Brian Clough lasted at Leeds United. And in the future, Ian, it would be an interesting book called 77 Days by Dom Mackay, wouldn't it?
Of course it would be. And just sort of going back to your point before about like the replication of success stories elsewhere. I said this, I think it was my first or second week back in Scotland, and I was saying, if it was me, it's not me obviously, but if it was me, I'd be going out, how you have like, ex-players who are now, they're aspiring managers or coaches, and they'll go out, they'll take a year off or something, and they'll go around and they'll go and look at look at training methods of other clubs, and they'll try and just get lots and lots of gen into their head. Why not do that at boardroom level? Look at the clubs that are doing it well. Send an envoy. Look, people are only too willing to share successful stories and show, and go out and either headhunt people and cherry pick them and bring them into your organisation, or try and seek to just how are you doing it. Plenty of people have done it with the Ajax philosophy,
yeah,
right? In football, in terms. over years and years and years. I remember a story about Ajax going to, and asking Liverpool if they could do the same in the 70s. And Ajax went over and apparently Liverpool were just playing five-a-sides. And Ajax is saying, "Oh, you're taking the PISS here. You know, what do you really do? Why don't you show us?" And they says, "This is what we do." And that's what this successful dynasty was built on. But it was still, you know, they opened the doors to, another club. So it's not difficult. I mean, it's difficult to implement, but you've got to go out and you've got to at first have the philosophy. What do we want to achieve? Where do we want to go? What's the plan that we want to do? Right. Let's go and find the people. Let's go and find the thing that we want to replicate and bring to our club. And you've got to invest in it. You've got to spend money on it. The money's all sitting in the bank, penny pinching and trying to do everything on the cheap. This youth system, all that kind of stuff. You've got to invest heavily in that end, and it's going to take a few years. But ultimately, it should bear fruit. But you've got to take it seriously, and we're not taking it seriously. And you said it before, and I think you said it on Fridays. This is Acsom. They don't seem to know what their plan is. What should we do? You know, and that's unforgivable for a club of our size. We should have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan. You know,
there doesn't seem to be any instinct, Ian. You know, when you could go into a situation with someone who just has that instinct to know this is what we're doing. And you believe in that. I don't think we've got that. I think we're kind of rudderless at the moment. We don't have that instinct. You know,
they're not hungry enough. They're not hungry enough for it.
They got fat and lazy. They got fat and lazy, didn't they? But talking about that, I mean, even in the realms of a Celtic state of mind, what do I do to try and progress and develop what we have here as a platform? Well, what I do is of a day, I will probably work 10, 12, 14 hours. And I say work, I'm working maybe on this system here. And constantly during that period, I'm listening to and watching content from all over the world, different genres of content creators, very, very few that actually talk about Celtic or Scottish football, because I think it's interesting to have a different view on this, and with a view to constantly pushing this forward. So I'm going to share a little image with everybody. Oh my God, I've put it in the wrong block. That's behind the scenes. We don't want that. Let's put it in the right category so that everybody can see it. I'm going to share a little image with everybody, and this shows, I think, a good insight into where Acsom is going to be heading. Just yesterday, I announced that we had been nominated for and made the finals of the Football Content Awards, which take place in Leeds down at Elland Road. That's Leeds had 2 mentions on today's show. And it's the 11th time that we have made the finals. And hopefully we can bring home our 8th award. This is what I'm talking about. This was the setup yesterday. And this is taking a different step in a different direction in terms of the broadcasting quality of what you are watching today, for example. So yesterday I did an interview which will go out on Friday night. And I've announced that on the social media channels. The interview is with Willie Hockey, who has been a board member at Celtic. He's not currently on the board. But comments he made last week, as soon as he made them, I thought, right, there's something afoot. And as Liam would understand with regards to how the tabloid journalism works, I wasn't happy with it. I thought Willie had been misrepresented because I've spoken to Willie Hockey about his thoughts about Celtic, etc. And he's definitely not got an us and them kind of viewpoint in relation to the fan base. So Willie agreed to get a few things off his chest, and this is the setup. And this shows where Acsom is going. Liam, it's taken a wee while, but that's some setup, isn't it?
Yep, looks great. Aye, I'm well impressed. That's the first time I've seen that, actually, since you've been talking about it for long enough. That's the first time I've actually seen the image of the finished article, and it looks fantastic. Yeah.
So that gives you an insight into what we can do. I mean, the final set may not be in that destination, may not be looking exactly quite like that, but that gives you an insight into where we're going, Liam. Obviously, you're developing the blog, which is a very important strand of Acsom, but in terms of the daily stuff and the content and the video content, this is where we're going. We're going to be broadcasting from a studio full time.
Aye, but but will you have katanas and transformers on show? That's what we all want to know.
Absolutely, they will be necessary as part of our progress. There is no doubt. At Celtic Follower, you're in on the YouTube afternoon troops. Yep, the Hibs game is a priority for you. The Europa League games are just an added bonus. And I'm just wondering, I'm not having a dig, I'm just wondering if you get a few results and you start doing well, will you be thinking, oh, this Europa League game's pretty good, isn't it? We shall see. Finbar, O'Branigan, black pudding or white pudding. I'm going to go for fruit. Finbar, I think you've got to go for fruit pudding. Not sure if you get that down your local chippy, but if so, give it a try. And Pete McGee, Seville, until the end result, gave us nothing but joy. And it wasn't the Champions League. You're absolutely right. I'm trying to be positive today. The Urban Culture. Watch what you are saying about Nicholson. He will set up. I know where you're getting that. He's a hard man. Yes, he'll set about me. I hope that doesn't happen. My 5 points that I think need to be done to restore the harmony between the club and the fan base in no particular order are as follows. Peter Lawwell needs to be removed from Celtic as a chairman, and it gives us an opportunity to reset that board, refresh it, bring in some new blood. I think that we need a new contract for Brendan Rodgers, and I think that's something he has spoken about. Communicate with the fans, give us the vision. Don't make it a one-off, make it a regular occurrence. You have everything in place. Communication, by the way, don't get me wrong on this. Communication doesn't have to be one-on-one in the same room. Communication can be in the form of better written statements. It can be in the form of using your platform to communicate through the wonder of video technology. Set up a meeting with the Celtic Fans Collective. Let's get together. Let's see where the middle ground is going to be in relation to this and start working together moving forward. And for me, you've got to tear up the recruitment department, restructure it, and start planning for January. Let me know what you think in the comment section about that. We do have a game tomorrow night. We will be focusing on that on tomorrow's show. All that's left for me to say today is thank you once again, Ian Conroy and Liam Carrigan, for joining me on a Celtic State of Mind.